Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is Friday night, 9:30 p.m. Calgary, Alberta time. It is May the 7th. I am happy to be here. This is Child Abuse Prevention, and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. It's a 30-minute live streaming internet radio broadcast, from blogtalkradio.com, and I'm so happy to be able to do this show. And we're going to continue on talking about effects of domestic violence on children. We started this on Wednesday. We've been talking about domestic violence for at least a week and a half now, somewhere around there. And it's so important that we take a look at this stuff. Anyone who's ever experienced it would know, firsthand what it's like, or secondhand, if you're a secondhand victim of domestic violence. I'm a secondhand victim of domestic violence. I grew up in a home full of domestic violence, and I saw it in my friends' families as well as neighbors and stuff like that. So it is going on. It's happening all over the place and all around the world, not just North America. And so it's just so important that we take a look at it. It's huge. It's abuse is what it is. And unfortunately, it's perpetrated by the people that really should love us the most and should care about us the most, our partners, our husbands, our wives, our partners, and our boyfriends and girlfriends, and these are the people that you choose to be with because you love them, and then for whatever reason, whether it started in the beginning of the relationship or before the marriage even happened, or just developed later, but abuse starts to happen, and the partner, the abuser, just turns on the other partner for whatever reason, and it generally has something to do with the fact that they feel they need to control the other person, and so they do it by enforcing abuse and abusive behavior on their partner. And so that's just the whole issue. It's so hard for people that are stuck in domestic violence situations, and I know, because this is someone that they love, and this is someone that they thought they loved, enough to marry them and to spend their lives with them, and then to find, just to be treated so badly by them. It's so hard to get out of those types of relationships, because there's a bond there, there's a love there, and even when people are hurting us, we might still love them, right? Fact is people are losing their lives. Partners are being killed at the hands of their abusive partners, and so that's the whole issue. We really have to take a look at this and the impacts that it has on the children, if there's any children in the home, and that's why I wanted to continue on talking about this tonight. And it's not a professional show. I don't hold any professional counseling certificates. I'm not a therapist or a counselor. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my blog talk show because I really feel that, I want to be one more voice, just to add to everybody else's voice who's already out there, and just to continue talking about abuse and keep getting the word out to people. And since I have experienced so much abuse in my life and seen so much horror and destruction within families and within my own family, I thought, it's so important that we all stand up and try to make a difference in this world, whether we've been abused or not, whether we've ever been in a domestic violence or abuse situation. We can all make a difference and, help people and help to make this world a better place for children, especially, as adults. It's our job, it's our generation's job to do the best we can to uphold and to fight for child rights, for human rights. Because every generation that goes by has a job to do, and that is to make this world a better place, So it's just so important that we do talk about this stuff, and so I'm glad that you can be here. But just listen at your own discretion, because I do cover all topics regarding abuse of every kind, whether it's child abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, all types of child abuse, physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, spiritual, you name it. If it's about abuse, I'm talking about it. And because we need more people talking about it. It really needs to be in the mainstream society. It should be, I'm not saying, every moment of the day, but I'm saying that throughout the day, if we, if we see someone being abused, we really should report it. It's against the law, actually, not to. And if we know of a child or suspect a child's being abused, it's against the law to not report it. You have to report it. Abuse is against the law, and so it's really going to take all of us to make this difference, right? We all can't, one person can't be the watchdog for the world. to make this happen, right? It's going to take every single person. So that's why I decided, instead of just sitting on the couch and not liking what I saw out there in the world that I live in today, and not liking what I experienced in my own family and my own home, I thought, why not get involved? And so that's why I'm doing this. And so yeah, it's not a professional show, and I just ask everyone to listen at your own discretion. The topics of abuse can be very sensitive, and that's why we have to know what's safe for us to listen to. And so I would just ask that everyone listen at their own discretion, and if the topic makes you uncomfortable, you please turn the show off. You have to listen. You have to know what's good for you to listen to, and then if it's not, turn the show off. And children under the age of 18, young people especially, but anyone under the age of 18, I would ask that you would have someone to listen to this show with you, an adult, right? Excuse me, someone who can help you make the decision on whether or not you should be listening to it. I cover a lot of adult material on here, and this show is ultimately about saving children, saving children's lives, and stopping child abuse. But there's a lot of adult content on here, and I think children should have permission to listen to this show. I'm just not sure where the players are nowadays. People might have taken the players and placed them around on different websites, and there's no way that I can keep track of that or control that. So if you're a young person and you're listening, if you don't have a parent who cares, which I know so often that we don't, maybe you have a teacher, a guidance counselor at school, a mentor, a coach, someone in your life who's older, who can help you make the decision, who's trustworthy, and who can help you make the decision if whether or not you should be listening. I just think it's so important. And then they can help you if you have questions and whatnot, right? Some of the material might be a little bit, hard to understand because abuse is not talked about very much. Not very many people like to talk about abuse. Mainstream society likes to ignore it because it's so uncomfortable and so discouraging, right? It's so disgraceful what happens to people in this world. So a lot of times people will glance over an article, they'll just briefly look at it, then they become depressed because they saw this article in the paper and about someone being killed, especially children killed at the hands of their parents and caregivers. Then they don't want to read the article because they know it's going to be some horrific story and they don't want to ruin their day, so they don't read it, and so there isn't a whole lot of people getting involved in the fact that this is happening, it's real, and if you've never experienced being abused, then you just wouldn't know what these children are going through. It's really horrific and horrible, and it needs to stop. And so that's why I just want to be one more voice out there to keep continuing on to do this show. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We got about 20 minutes left. We're going to look at potential impacts at different ages of domestic violence and abuse on children, right? Children who grow up in homes full of domestic violence, it does affect them in all different kinds of ways, and it does affect them differently at different stages in their lives as they're developing, right? Like infants and toddlers. We went through this on Wednesday night, and we were looking at the fact that, infants and toddlers, if there's domestic violence in the home, loud noises and vivid visual images can be, violence can be very distressing to a toddler and an infant. Parents may not be able to consistently respond to the infant's needs, which may negatively affect the parent-child bond with little toddlers and infants when they really need to be bonding with that parent and that child-parent relationship. That bond happens really early, happens from the womb, really, but then it really begins to take place as they get, develop into their infant stages, and then to become toddlers, and there's that parent-child bond, right? But if there's a lot of domestic violence in the home, children don't get what they're needing from the parents, and even if one of the parents is not abusing the child and they love the child, they are being abused themselves because the abuser's obviously abusing them. That's why there's domestic violence. So the child doesn't get what they need from that parent, and they witness abuse. It's very scary to grow up in a home full of abuse. I know that I did, and it was a horrible place to grow up, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, not even my worst enemies, right? Except for the abusers that are doing this stuff. I would wish it on them, sadly enough, you know what I mean? But the thing is it's not something you would wish on somebody. It's a horrible way to grow up and to form your the basis for your life based on abuse, right? Horrible, absolutely horrible, and it takes a lifetime to get over it. It takes years and years and years, and if these children actually make it, you know what I mean? So many kill themselves, so many go on to commit suicide, so many do so many drugs that they overdose. There's so many things that happen to kids who grow up in these violent homes, and we see it all the time. It's just become part of society, and it is a real problem, and it's not these children's fault. And, I don't care what anybody says, it's not these children's fault. And they grow up to be adults, and then have to deal with the aftermath of what these abusers have put on them. And so it wasn't their fault in the first place. No child deserves to be abused, and no child should have to witness abuse in a home, even if they're not being abused. The abuse that's happening between the two, whether they're married, the two partners, is very damaging to a child to see that, right? It is completely damaging, and it can cause them to go on and lead abusive lives toward their own family members, as it's a learned behavior, right? Preschoolers, if they grow up in domestic violence and abuse situations, they learn unhealthy ways of expressing anger and aggression. They're confused by conflicting messages, like for instance, what I see versus what I'm told. That's what, like, do as I say but not as I do sort of thing. They may attribute violence to something they have done. They might feel it's their fault. That's why the parents are fighting. They might take that role on and think, oh, it's something I've done. It's because I'm a bad child and I'm a bad kid. That's why my parents are fighting, right? They might take on the guilt from that, right? They might learn the gender roles associated with violence and victimization, and instability may inhibit independence, and they may start. These are preschoolers, right? They may all of a sudden kind of go back to that toddler stage, right? Or more like infantile behaviors, right? So that's what we were looking at on Wednesday night. And I wanted to continue on with this. We left off at school-age children, 6 to 11, increased emotional awareness of self and others. And we actually read through this part as well. More awareness of their own reactions to violence at home and of impact on others. And concern for the mother's safety, for instance, if the father's been charged or whatever, there's all kinds of issues with that. Their emotions start to develop, right? They become emotionally aware of what's going on with themselves and others between the ages of 6 and 11. That's what this article says. And I should give you the website. I did on Wednesday night. This is from the ECE, Early Childhood Educator's Handbook to Increase Understanding and Improve Community Responses. And it's from http //endabuse.org, endabuse.org, endabuse.org. It's called Impacts on Children regarding domestic violence. And it's a good article. It's a short little article, but I think it's really worth looking at. And they go on to talk about for children 6 to 11 years old, that's where we left off, increased same-sex identification. They may learn gender roles associated with intimate partner abuse. For example, males as perpetrators, females as victims. That's if they grow up in a home where the male figure in the family is abusing the female figure in the family. Then they associate it that's the behavior that a normal behavior, right? It's because children, whatever they experience, they are little sponges that, we all know this. They learn behaviorally from the parents. So if the parents are not using good coping skills and not properly parenting, and they're abusing each other, or one's abusing the other one, they pick that up. These children, it's very hard not to, right? When you're growing up and as a child in a home like that, you're going to learn these behaviors, and it's really hard to not take them on and continue that cycle of abuse, right? And that's why there's a lot of abuse out there. I really believe it. People are treated so badly as children, and then they go, even if it's just emotional abuse, some people don't realize how severely damaging emotional abuse is. Emotional abuse, like, generally, if there's physical abuse, there's going to be emotional abuse there too. But sometimes there's just emotional abuse and there's no real physical abuse. But emotional abuse, verbal abuse and whatnot, right, is so incredibly damaging to a child. Even without the physical abuse, the emotional abuse is so much harder to get over, because if a child survives physical abuse and actually moves past it, it's not the physical abuse that actually causes the real damage inside of their hearts, inside of their minds, inside of their spirits. It really damages their whole psyche and their whole way of looking at life, the whole way that they view life and view other people, the way they view themselves, right? And so they will quite often go on to self-sabotage. They'll go on self-sabotage their own lives as adults, right? If they enter into a relationship, they will take that pain with them into that relationship, and they might think, "Oh, this is great. I'm an adult now. I don't have to live like I did when I was young." But then soon the pressures start, and then the behaviors. If they never really learned how to develop proper behaviors and how to cope with things, right? Because when you grow up in an abusive home and there's a lot of domestic violence, there's really no coping skills, and so they don't learn these coping skills. That's what happened in my case, and so you have to learn them later as an adult. And so you could have your own children, you could have your own family or partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, and you could pass this stuff right on to them, and not even meaning to, because you're hurting. That's how they're hurting so badly that they end up abusing their partners and their children. And that a lot of it is just a cycle of abuse, right? Not all of it. Some of it has a lot to do with substance abuse. Some of it has some people grow up in perfectly great homes, have wonderful lives growing up and everything, but they become addicted to some sort of substance abuse, like some sort of a drug addiction or alcohol addiction, and pretty soon their behaviors start changing for whatever reason. Maybe they have some problems going on inside of their own emotions and whatnot, and they don't reach out and get help, so they lash out at the family. And so that can happen too. And then there's also instances of mental illness, and I think there's a lot of mental illness out there that goes undiagnosed. People have children, they don't even realize that they're sick, they're depressed, they have manic depression, there's postpartum depression, there's all kinds of different things, borderline personality disorders, schizophrenia and whatnot, manic depression and stuff like that, suicidal tendencies and behaviors. And then, they might not even realize they have a problem, and they bring children into the world, and before you know it, they've gone and done something completely horrible to their children, and without even realizing it, this happens to people. It's horrible, absolutely horrible, because what do you do with these people? They needed help, they didn't get help. They go on to either kill their children or kill their partners, and or both, kill the whole family, right? Quite often we see reports in the paper of whole families being killed by an abusive partner, and then the partner kills themselves in a suicide. So it's a murder-suicide, right? And we see that quite a bit in the paper and on the news, and that's generally stemmed from a domestic violence situation that might have been going on for a long, long time. No one got any help, and so this is the sort of thing you want to keep yourself. If you are in a domestic violence situation, there's ways to keep yourself safe, and we're going to go over some of that. But we're going to continue on with this. Signs a child is having difficulties. Young children may display some of the following difficulties when they are living with domestic violence. However, young children may show these problems for many other reasons, and children displaying them may not have been exposed to domestic violence. So, when they do these articles up and they do these studies and they come up with this information, they always throw that in there because, some children will display these types of behaviors even if they weren't abused. It's just that these are typically behaviors that are associated with either child abuse or witnessing or living in a domestic violence situation. But not every child who has these symptoms might be living in a domestic violence situation, because they might have other issues going on. Just like we were talking about, mental issues, or something just not quite right, they need some help with a child psychotherapist or whatever to try to help them get over anxieties or whatever. It doesn't mean that just because a child's anxious that they've been abused or that they're coming from a domestic violence situation. They might have some sort of a chemical imbalance. I mean, who knows, right? There could be in any number of things, but it's something to keep your eye open for, and it's something to keep your eye on. That's why the signs and symptoms of abuse are so important to know and to recognize. All the different signs of the different types of child abuse, because you could save a child's life, right? You could totally save a child's life if you are aware of what to look for and then report it. Of course, it won't do you any good to know the signs and then not report it. You have to know how to report child abuse as well. So that's why I'm big on all my shows. I always tell people we have to know the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse. Then we have to know how to properly report it. Because, hey, you never know when a child's going to come to you and say, hey, I'm being abused. Can you help me? You know what I mean? Especially an older youth who's just feels that their life's being threatened and they don't want to die, and they finally they trust you enough to come to you to tell you this. You never know. It can happen. It happened to me. And, I was that one young kid who went to my friend's house, and her parents stepped in for me. And, I did tell them what had happened and stuff, and if I didn't want to do that, I would have gone to the park and just sat down and probably maybe went into shock in a coma or died or something. But I did want to live and I did want to survive, so I went to my friend's house. But the thing is you never know when a kid's going to come to you. Little children generally cannot do that. They don't have the capabilities of doing that. But that's why we have to look out for these little children, because they don't often realize that they can tell anybody, especially if their parents have threatened them, right? So that's why we have to be their voice. We have to be their eyes, their ears, and we have to be able to be their voice to shout out to get some help. So we have to make the phone call. You know what I mean? So important. So we're going to go on and look at this here. This is young children may display some of the following difficulties if they're living with domestic violence and abuse, right? So there's physical complaints. They might have headaches, stomach aches, and that's just from being sick and nervous all the time. Listening to people screaming and shouting at each other will give you a headache. Listening to people throwing dishes and breaking things will give you a headache. Listening to people screaming at the top of their lungs will give you a headache, right? Slamming doors, things like that. Stomach aches, that would be from nervous tension, holding their stomach really tight because they're afraid. I spent my whole entire youth like that, very sick to my stomach all the time, and just feeling very nervous, uptight. A lot of just very tense muscle tension, right? And I would sit like that all day, especially when I was in the home. I could kind of relax a little bit when I was out away from the home, but if I was in the house, I could feel it, and it would definitely start like the moment I went into the house. I was automatically on edge and nervous, and because you just never knew what was going to be happening at our house, right? Separation anxiety beyond what you would normally expect for the age of the child. Sleep difficulties, fear of falling asleep, increased aggressive behavior and angry feelings, physically hurting self or others, and that's from watching, two partners, their parents or their, whoever their parents are fighting. They might develop these angry feelings and aggressive behavior, right? That's what that does, to children, and it might cause them to physically hurt themselves or others. If they see their parents bullying, let's say they see one of their parents bullying the other one, pushing the other one around and abusing the other one, then they take that out onto the school grounds and start pushing other kids around. Quite often aggressive behavior, well, it's a learned behavior, so the kids will sometimes go that way, or they'll go the other way and they'll be completely passive, and they'll just sit in a corner somewhere and they don't want to have any interaction with people. They'll, what I mean, if you notice a child's overly aggressive or just really extremely shy and kind of fearful of everybody, you can kind of figure something's going on. Children aren't normally like that, so there has to, and it might not be that they're being abused, but it certainly is a behavior that should be looked into, right? Constant worry about possible danger. That was me. It was always very scary around my house. Seeming loss of previously learned skills, like toileting skills, naming colors and things. Yeah, like all of a sudden, that's kind of like trauma. Child experiences, like let's say that their parents are fighting and these children are subjected to month after month of abusive behavior from one partner to the other. Even if they're not being abused, their minds aren't going to be on the thinking about normal things. They're just going to be scared and upset and uptight. They might all of a sudden revert back to an earlier period in their life, like they were saying, like back to a toddler or infantile stage, right? Withdrawal from others and activities, that's like being passive, like withdrawing and not wanting to be a part of things and not wanting to get involved. Lack of interest in or feelings about anything, that's a definite sign. If they just don't show any kind of sign of being excited about anything and they just sit there just staring off into space, and that's somebody who's kind of going within themselves, you know what I mean? They're just tuning everything out because it's too much, you know what I mean? And that's a very big sign to look for. And a lot of people just think that the kids maybe just not that bright or that intelligent, but actually those kids are actually just probably going within themselves just for protection, which is extremely bad, and they need help, Excessive worry about the safety of loved ones, needing to see siblings during the day, asking constantly about mommy. Yeah, that's something that can happen with children, worrying about the safety of loved ones. I mean, I was always kind of concerned about the safety of my family because there was always some sort of crazy thing going on. There was 5 kids in the home plus 2 parents. It was a sort of a steady fight going on all the time between everybody, right? So it was very hard. I was always concerned about the safety of everybody, and especially when I was at school, I'd be sitting there all day just sort of thinking about what was going on at home and what was happening, right? Difficulty choosing and completing an activity or task. very high activity level, constant fidgeting and or trouble concentrating at levels atypical, like typical for a child's age and stage of development. And it says, we suggest parents seek assistance for their child from a physician or family counseling agency when his or her behavior is physically harmful to the child or others, like cutting own clothes with scissors, laying down on the street, etc. Just almost trying to say, I don't care what happens to me, I'll just lay down in the street. If there's which that was very much my behavior. I did engage in a lot of dangerous type activities because I didn't care about myself, I didn't care about my body. I figured, hey, my parents didn't care about my body and abused me, so why should I care about my own body? And so I used to do a lot of crazy things and jump off of extremely high things and try to break my own body, right? I was basically trying to do what my parents were doing, and I was modeling after what they were doing to me. And, it's horrible, right? No kid should have to feel like that, so bad about themselves that they try to finish the job for the parents. But that's how I felt, and that's what can happen, right? So it's just horrible. So that's when family counseling should be, or child should be taken to a physician or family counselor, right? Also, if there's an intense enough, if the problems are intense enough to interfere with the child's day-to-day adjustment in the program, or if they do not respond to basic child guidance strategies, or if it persists over time, for 3 to 6 weeks, this sort of thing, it's very important to get your children help. Even if they weren't abused, but they grew up around abuse, like a domestic violence situation, you still want to get that child some help. They are going to need help to work through those feelings and the emotions and the trauma from being in an abusive environment, right? It's so important. Supportive responses. What can child care teachers do? Young children benefit from supportive caregivers in safe places, such as child care and social settings. Early childhood teachers can assist young children affected by domestic violence by providing a nurturing environment, creating predictability through child care routines, developing strategies to support children's adjustment in the child care program, and providing support to parents, for example. I spent my first year of school, went to school early. I was under the age of 5 when I started grade 1 because I had to either start that year or wait another year, and I think the social workers were telling my mom to put me in early because to get me out of the house I would be safer at school. I'm sure of it. I know it. I know that's what was going on. I spent my first year crying. I was so miserable. I was just such a miserable kid. And I spent my first year crying and bawling, of course, because that's all I did at home, too. So I just continued it on at school. And my teacher made fun of me the whole entire time and called me a crybaby. She never once questioned whether or not I was being abused. She never once questioned why I was crying all the time. She was very mean, hurtful. This is what can happen. You have to look out for your children. You really do. There's nobody else to do it. And so if you're a parent and you're being abused and your children are growing up in that abuse and you don't stop to think about them first, there's a real problem. First of all, you have to think about your own safety first because you have to support that child. So you have to get yourself to safety. And there are safety plans out there. You can get a great safety plan. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence.org has a great safety plan. And that's at www.ncadv.org. NCADV. That's a National Coalition Against Domestic Violence.org. You can get your own personal safety plan there. You can develop one for yourself, and also www.domesticviolence.org. They also have another safety plan on their website, and you just want to make sure you get a safety plan. If you're in a domestic violence situation and you're suffering from domestic violence and abuse, you owe it to yourself, first of all, to have a good life. You do not deserve to be abused. No one does. There's no love in the world worth losing your life, you know what I mean? Being beaten down and battered so badly that your life is over and ended and you're killed at the hands of your partner that you quote-unquote love. That's not love. And I'm just telling you right now, you better make sure you get help, and you better make sure you get your kids some help, because that's not love, and it has nothing to do with love. It's about control and abuse, and that's not showing somebody love to beat them and to kill them. That's just not loving. So make sure you get yourself some help. And you want to get onto some of those domestic violence websites. We've got about a minute left. I'm the Canada Regional Director. There we go. Canada Regional Director for DreamCatchersForAbusedChildren.com. And you want to check out our website. I'm just getting tired now here tonight. Check out our website, http://DreamCatchersForAbusedChildren.com, and you can get some great information on there regarding child abuse, signs and symptoms, how to report it. You can get a free PDF download, the Child Abuse Handbook, which is written by Donna Shear and Sandra Potter. It's a great handbook, and it's free, and you can download it right from our website, http://DreamCatchersForAbusedChildren.com. And get a hold of me if you need something. You can get a hold of me here on Blog Talk Radio or also on Facebook. I'm available. I'm around. I'm here to help with questions. If you have any comments or questions, please get a hold of me and let me know. Or if I can just be a friend or a shoulder, I'm very much willing to do that. And, I care about you all so much. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you will reach out and get some help. Keep that hope alive. And have a great night, everybody. Take care.